Hey, what's up guys, aarava here, and welcome to my first ever laps on F1 23. A huge thanks to EA for giving me access to this early preview build of the game, and in this first 15-minute video, we're going to be going through my first laps, my first race on this game, and giving you my full thoughts on the brand new handling model, which is, I gotta say just off the bat, so much better than the previous game. It's so enjoyable to drive again through the corners, out of corners, and this is something I felt almost immediately on my very first outlap, going flat through cops and actually feeling like the aerodynamics of this car were actually pushing the car into the ground at high speed. At lower speed, it's more about the mechanical grip and the tyre is actually doing something, but at that higher speed, it finally feels like the aero actually exists and the grip is not just coming through the tyres. And then when you're at lower speed, the traction and the torque delivery through the gears, well, there's no more wheel spin up to like 4th and 5th gear, let's just say. And when you do start to spin the wheels a little bit, you can actually wrestle the car out of the corners and catch it. But we're going to get to that with a full race gameplay of a 35% distance. But before that, I just wanted to give you a little taster of the menus and also show you the new character models for the full grid of drivers. I think most of the drivers on this year's game have received updated face scans. Some are, I think, the same as F1 22 in the case of the Mercedes drivers, for example, but there are clear differences in a lot of other drivers, especially Lando Norris at McLaren. Very different character model to what he's had in the last couple of years, and the new character modeling even includes Valtteri Bottas's interesting new mullet hairstyle. And we did see from some behind the scenes clips knocking about earlier this year that EA are actually using now the technology and the photography systems they use for the FIFA game for the F1 character model. So where there are updates, they are looking so much crisper, and I'm loving the new menu styles and also the music as well. You may hear in the background, there's actually a remix from one of the songs they used back in the 2012 game, which I must say was a nice hit of nostalgia when I booted it up and heard it for the first time play. But we're getting into this now, the brand new 35% race distance, and I think for the purposes of this video, a decent race length to show off the handling in action and give you my thoughts as we go along, as we go to 5 red lights and we're underway for our first ever race on F1 23. We're driving as Fernando Alonso in the Aston Martin from the back of the grid, so we'll see how far up the order we can go, taking things easy into turn 1 and then looking to make a move down the inside of Village. Now, throughout this gameplay, you want to focus on the throttle trace on that green side of the heads-up display to see how early I can go full throttle through some of these corners. You know, through that left-hander, typically you'd be going half throttle for most of it, trying to pull out the corner on F1 22, but now it's a different world. You now have that confidence, and it's confidence that you have to grow into, because I'm going to tell you right now, you and I and everyone have learned some habits from F1 22 that you're going to have to try and unlearn now with the new handling model in this game. Not just with throttle as well. Braking, I found actually quite tricky to get to grips with compared to F1 22, as we try to have a little look at Oscar Piastri as the AI shuts the door on us through cops. We're now going to have a go at him as we go towards Stowe, and he goes quite defensive, doesn't really give us too much room on the outside. Found the AI so far very willing to go to the inside lines now to defend the position, but as we get the move on the McLaren, we go down the inside of Albon, the inferior Williams, and the rear steps out a little bit there, and that is due to the new rear locking on the brakes. So if you're late on the brakes, usually with no ABS, you can lock the fronts, but now if you go steaming into a corner far too late, and also you're trying to turn the car in too early before it's really stopped, now on top of a front lock, you can actually get the rear axle locking, which will kick the tail out for you to then wrestle. But speaking about wrestling that car into a corner, wrestling it out of a corner is so much more intuitive now. Even here, as you're about to see, little bit of oversteer, just a slight correction, and the car complies. If that was F1 22, I'm convinced I would have spanned there on that move versus Gasly, as Ocon suffered mechanical failure of some sorts to slow him down. And then it took us a whole 5 laps to actually finally catch up to this fight that's been brewing between Sainz, Perez, Leclerc and Russell, and that gave me some time to just push the car a bit harder and start finding the limit with this game on the throttle, on the curbs as well. Like right there, that little bit of oversteer, if that was last year's game, I would have been off left into the grass, but instead I was able to catch it, and now we're having a go at Russell on the inside, and this is going to turn into a nice little tasty battle through Luffield as we try and go round the outside and dance the car round the outside in the Aston Martin. I must preface, this is a preview build, so in terms of car performance levels, do not take anything into it. They will change from this to launch, and then I'm sure further still. So this is more just about getting a first impression of the handling and the wheel-to-wheel action we can have with the AI. Russell's going to stick with us through Mads and Beckett because we are going to make another mistake here, but it's going to be a great example of that different handling and the ability to catch it. Just a real big snap on the steering wheel. Again, that 100% would have been me spinning off into the distance on last year's game, but just a quick bit of thinking to go fully left, correct it, get off throttle a little bit. Russell does get us back, but we're still in the race. We've still not made a huge blunder, and the car actually complied with me trying to catch it rather than completely losing all sense of grip as we come into the pit lane now. A puff of smoke off the Mercedes as there is some new lock-up animations from the smoke coming off the car when the tyres actually lock, and we come into the pit lane, same usual turn in, trying to get that optimum pit stop, and we actually do the undercut on Perez as we see Sainz battling Russell as we get a bit of rear locking going on into Village, trying to push the car a bit too much sometimes into these brake zones. And it was something I'm still getting used to, the braking, because you would have noticed through Village there I actually didn't go down enough gears because I was still in 6th gear trying to rotate the car in, and that's a habit that I've got from F1 22 of staying in higher gears. And again, going back to that thing of, I think all of us are going to have to unlearn the higher gear meta that was on last year's game, because out of corners you don't need to do that, and into corners as well you need to make sure you get down to the lower gear to make sure the car's not sliding us away, as we now make a lovely little double pass attempt on the 2 Ferraris. We got Carlos Sainz as he was caught napping into Village, but trying to get Leclerc was a bit more difficult round the outside. There we go, and we have got the move done. DRS available to us now, chase after Russell as well. He's got no DRS to defend with. He goes defensive though to the inside, which is good to see. Very, very fine margins there as we almost bang tyres on the inside. We're going to get up into P3 ahead of us. Verstappen and Hamilton battling and throwing it back to 2021, but we've now got a train of, I suspect, quicker cars on this build. So now we're going to try and see how we can defend with very little ERS, I might say, and right here through Cops. Why did I lift? I wasn't confident enough there. And that's the problem. You need to learn that confidence, because Russell mugs us off there. I should have been more committed, because at this point, 13 laps into this race, I still just have that thing in my mind of, oh, it's not going to stick. It's not going to stick. But it will. The aero now actually does the work. So you'll see on a next lap that we do go flat on through as the fuel comes out as well. But we re-overtake Russell into Stowe. And I feel like by the end of the race, I was a lot more confident with this Aston Martin car pushing it, especially defending against the cars coming at me. As now it's Leclerc and P4 behind, Sainz P5. There you go. Easily flat. Don't even need to really move the steering wheel that much, and it just complies with this. But we've got Leclerc chasing after us. Perez at some point will also come through because he is in a slightly quicker car on this build. But Leclerc comes through. We go defensive. He's got DRS, but we just stick with the inside line. He's still there on the outside, so we have to show him the cold shoulder by going wide back to the racing line. Eventually, though, like I said, here comes Sergio Perez in that inevitable Red Bull. He's got Russell, he's got Sainz, and now he will try and get Leclerc. Leclerc tried to actually overtake me before Perez got him here, but he will eventually get him as we go defensive again into the final few corners. And unlike F1 22, these final corners actually quite calm. You know, this corner right here would have been spin-off century, but now you can get on throttle about halfway through the corner very easily. But on to the last lap of this race then, a 35% race distance around Silverstone, first time on the game. Perez trying to make the move, but we're trying to do Fernando Alonso some justice by getting a podium for him in the Aston Martin. Verstappen wins the race. We go defensive again. Bit of a lock-up into the final 2 corners there, and cap off this with a fitting podium for Fernando Alonso in the Aston Martin, and round out a very fun first race on F1 23. I must admit, I had more fun in that race than I have in the entire last maybe 3-4 seasons of F1 22 My Team career mode. Just for the pure corner-to-corner feeling. Actually some semblance of grip and downforce and traction. And here are the podium sequences. Much improved lighting, I must say. The character models and the hairstyle, still a bit questionable, I must say, on some of the models, in my opinion. But the lighting for sure, that new color grading, a lot more cinematic and like TV and film, as they've said. But now in this kind of, last portion of the video, just want to show you some little things here. So this is the new lock-up animation. You may have seen it come off the AI in that Silverstone race, but on board, this is what it looks like. So a lot more smoke coming off the actual bottom part of the tyre where the tyre's locking, and if you have a massive lockup, you'll see a big plume of smoke coming off the tyres like we see in real life a lot of the time. And then this is the best illustration of the rear axle locking. Way too late, way too hot, turn the car, rear end snaps out, and that's not for traction or grip. That is just me being way too late on the brakes there, and you can see the way the car rotates. I still make the corner, I'm just drifting through it, whereas now here I've had to be a bit more cautious, brake in a straight line, bit of understeer there. That's just from me not judging the brake point right. Now we're going through a sequence of time trial laps just to show you the various different traction levels at the tracks available to us in the preview build. Again, that kind of corner, Hungary, F1 22, there's a reason why I've not played Hungary on F1 22 in absolute ages, because it was just not enjoyable. Like, every traction zone was so difficult, whereas now, especially now in Sector 2 as well, with this technical section, Monaco at the barriers, you can feel the downforce pressing the car in. It's still challenging, don't get me wrong, Hungaroring is a bit of a ball ache of a circuit anyway, but now on this year's game, I felt like, oh, I've actually got a bit of grip in Sector 2, and in Sector 3, these 2 corners, not as much of a pain. I can get on throttle, near full throttle, pretty early on through that final bend of the Hungaroring, whereas on F1 22, you'd be going up a few more gears and still going half throttle. I found Miami, I don't know if it's a newer circuit, maybe they've modelled the actual track grip a bit differently. I did find Miami still a bit difficult on traction compared to other circuits I played in this build. I don't know if that was a placebo of me just not liking Miami very much anyway as a track to drive, but I did feel like personally there was a bit of a difference in the track grip you got from Miami, and that would be realistic because it is a bit of an awkward circuit. It's made in a car park of the Miami Dolphins Stadium, so the track grip is going to be a bit different. And then this was the real litmus test at Montreal, one of my favourite circuits ever on the F1 game from all the last 12 years. I've been playing these games, and it was a lot more enjoyable on this year's game, and a bit different, because you may notice that chicane felt a bit tighter to me. I think it is a bit tighter, as well as the final chicane as well. I corroborated this with a fellow creator, Tom97, as well, who agreed that it did feel a bit different. So I think maybe on this game, there are going to be a couple of circuits where there is a subtle bit of difference in maybe the track width or the tightness of some corners. And then certainly here at Canada, out the hairpin, I mean, that traction was 9-day difference to F1 22. And then this is what I mean. It just feels, the entry to that final chicane at Canada it comes at you so much quicker because they've updated the higher wall on the entry, but I think also the actual nature of the chicane, the way it goes in and out of the corner to the Wall of Champions, was a lot finer than it was on F1 22. And then around Imola, just kind of feeling out the curbs now and having a bit more confidence to chuck the car in, get on those curbs. This corner, always on this exit, was a nightmare. At this point, you'd be 2 gears higher, but now having that confidence just to put the power down on the curb as well, and knowing that even if it does snap a little bit, you can control it. Then into the chicane, obviously a difficult one at Imola, easy under braking, not to try and lock the front or the rear, and then down through these 2 left-handers. This is where you feel the aerodynamics, like you're chucking the car in there. It kind of almost felt like, the confidence I had with a maxed out car in F1 22. Obviously not maxed out car speeds, but the confidence levels are there as if you're driving a maxed out car. because the aero actually feels like it's doing something. And again, just another example of where last year's game, this would be a nightmare, whereas now I'm so early on full throttle. And this is all this gameplay, by the way, has been without any traction control, any ABS, as clearly shown there as I completely mess up that corner, as I think I dipped a tyre just a little bit on the grass. Again, though, I caught it. We didn't even go onto the grass. We were able to catch it and keep going in some sort of straight line. Yes, we lost some time, but you're not just being chucked down, spat out by a curb or the wheel spin like you would have on last year's game. So I think that's the biggest takeaway is every corner just felt way more intuitive to drive. Even if there was a little mistake you were making, it felt intuitive of what to do. Okay, I'll, counter steer, bit of off throttle, we'll wrestle it through, and it's still actually going to make it through the corner rather than this dramatic, quick spin out like on last year's game. And overall, as a first impression from that first race I did and all these time trial laps, it was just fun to drive the F1 game again. It didn't feel like a chore like it has done the entire time we've all been playing F1 22. And that's huge. The fact it's just fun is a big plus from me. And that's where I'm going to leave you guys for this video. If you have enjoyed it, be sure to hit that like button. Get subscribed for more gameplay, because this is just a little teaser of my next F1 23 gameplay coming at the start of next week. Till then, guys, enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.